like doing is I like capturing some sound bites to start with. Hello and welcome to episode 23 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name is Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode, we're talking to William Bell, EVP of Product at PhoenixNAP. Welcome to Great Things with Great Tech, William.
Thanks, Anthony. Happy to be here.
Awesome, mate. Look, just we'll get into all the goodness about PNAP and some really interesting stories around hosting, evolution of hosting, moving into some bare metal cloud hosting, in a few minutes. But before that, like every episode, I just want to give a shout out. And if you like Great Things with Great Tech and would like to feature on future episodes, you can click on the link in the show notes or go to launch.gtwgt and register your interest. All episodes of GTWGT are on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe below. Got to build that up there. And then you can also see all previous episodes as well, all previous 22. We're building up quite nicely, William. And also on all the podcast stations. So Google, Apple, Spotify, all distributed via anchor.fm. So with that, William, let's kick into the PNAP story. And like I like doing with these service providers, it's kind of the bread and butter of Great Things with Great Tech because, service providers do such great innovative things with technology that's given to them. Let's go with history and facts. Let's start back. Now, on Crunchbase and doing some research, it said that the company started in 2003, founded by Ian McClarity, but I think it goes back even further. So do you want to just talk about the good old days of the 90s and backyard or underground hosting providers?
Yeah, for sure. So, our CEO, Ron, was a chiropractor. His father was a chiropractor. They ran one of the premier chiropractic facilities in Phoenix, Arizona at the time. And he decided that he wanted to get into hosting, right? Hosting something internet, right? And they started a hosting company called Cave Creek Hosting out of the basement of their chiropractic office in 1996. And so that's kind of evolved where we're at today.
That's okay. So it's that typical sort of mid-90s ISP hosting startup story with modems in a basement. And it wasn't even a tech company. It was like a chiropractor. And so what happened after that? What were the years that followed up leading into, because I believe you joined in 2003. So you've been there for a long time, right? Close on 2 decades now. But what was the story leading up to 2003?
Yeah, so we founded a financial services company, CC Bill, in 1999, built that into a very, very successful business, kept running the hosting company kind of side by side. So they were kind of sister companies working side by side each other. And I predominantly worked for the hosting company up until 2006 and I took over basically internal operations. It was just running internal IT. And the company had grown to a few hundred people at that point, 200 or 300 people.
Okay. Already, right?
Yeah. So we've gotten into that kind of area, and we had, I don't know if you know this, but we opened an office in Malta in 2004 and really built up that European presence.
That's amazing. So just for the people at home who don't know, I'm obviously Australian, but my background is Maltese. I hold a Maltese passport. So, and Malta is a bit of a tech hub, and they obviously drew in a lot of big companies, giving big tax breaks for companies to operate there. So you guys actually, started there. So so straight after you have got an office there. Have you guys still got an office in Malta, or?
Absolutely, still 80 strong or so, 85 strong in Malta. Yeah.
Whenever I get to go back there, I might have to go and pay a visit and say hello.
Yeah,
and maybe if they're watching this, hello, Kifinti, Kifintom. All right, Tayyip, Tayyip. It's a bit of Maltese with an Australian accent. So that's cool. So that said, that wasn't PhoenixNAP at that point. That was still Cave Creek Hosting and CWIE.net. So just talk about what you guys offered back there around that time.
Yeah. So at that point, it was just what you're like truly high touch managed web hosting, right? And so people would come to us with pretty much any kind of problem. And there was no commoditization. There was no product SKUs. It was literally just like, here's your quote for what we can do for you. Here's a list of things that we're going to help you build. Right. And that was it. But it had become fairly significant. As 2009 approached and we were getting ready to start PhoenixNAP, we built up 3 separate data center installations in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
About 500 racks of equipment, right?
Wow.
And we were running 3 NOCs in different parts of the city. And I remember driving between different parts of the city, trying to help customers with different things. So
no, I've been to Phoenix, right? So one of the cities that I have actually stayed a couple of nights in was Phoenix. I actually drove up and stayed all the way at Buckeye up there in Phoenix, but I got into the city as well. So I'm aware of it. So you guys, and it didn't strike me as a very, very big city, but I mean, obviously in the context of whatever in the US, but you guys had 3 facilities there. So that's quite significant. And what happened then to start PhoenixNAP? I believe you basically consolidated those down, and that was the birth of it. So, explain the facility though, because that's important. Explain what you guys do that is different. The facility was quite kind of special, wasn't it? Was it special back then?
Yeah. So there's kind of concept is the reason we did this is, we built PhoenixNAP, the data center, right? As essentially the only idea of starting PhoenixNAP, the company. That's why the company name and the data center are the same.
Yeah.
And essentially we recognized that there was 2 things missing in Arizona at the time. And the first one was a true network hub, right? Okay. The NAP, network access point, comes from, that was our focus, right? We wanted to do that. And the day that we opened PhoenixNAP, the data center in Phoenix, we had 10 carriers built out in the facility, literally the day that we opened for business.
Okay.
And that's unheard of. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's right. So I think of data centers that I used to go around back in the day, a long time ago now, and I think of the global switches and the Equinixes and those sorts of corporates. But basically, their big claim and why people were attracted and gravitated to them was because of the connectivity, right? So I guess you guys really focused on the NAP piece to draw in your client base, and then around that, you build all the subsequent services. So many great hosting companies basically transcend themselves from being communication hubs. And you guys have definitely done that through the space you've got. So, working through the sort of timeline, in 2011, you guys started an unmanaged dedicated hosting business called SecureService.com. So just talk about that.
Yeah. So, we saw some of the things that guys like SoftLayer and Rackspace were doing kind of in that time period. And it was a nice, easy extension for us from being a data center operator to just racking and stacking iron and putting it on the internet, right? Yeah. Plus, we had all these skill sets from the hosting business that were still employed with the company, right? So we weren't starting from zero, essentially, right? Linux systems administrators we had in droves. So all these kind of concepts led to, okay, let's just start a dedicated server business, the same as you would see, today from like an OVH or a Hetzner in Europe, or there's not so many left in the US that are big. They're mostly, kind of spread out across small regional companies.
So was that, and that was both virtual and physical?
So we didn't do any virtual at the time. It was 2011 physical. And the way we got to what I think we're going to talk about next, which is VMware relationship, is the business, the internal side. What I was running at the time was entirely VMware based. And so this concept of why don't we do the same thing for virtual machines as we do for physical machines, right? Is how we got to 2012.
And that's interesting because, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about the today a little bit later on with the bare metal servers, and almost it's like coming full circle a little bit, right? But obviously it's a modern way of doing what you guys were doing with secure servers, right? So that's cool. So at this point, sort of how many servers were you guys sort of running back then in terms of numbers? Because I always like the American scale.
Yeah, it wasn't crazy, but I would say somewhere around 10,000, maybe 12,000 servers.
Decent, right? Like, especially from where I come from, I was happy to run, like what were we doing, like 5,000 virtual servers back then, so to have 10,000 physicals is pretty crazy. It's scale that's, you could only get in the States and whatnot. And employee-wise, had you grown any bigger from where you guys were? Or
so I think in 2010 we were somewhere around 300 employees. Today, we're about 600 employees worldwide.
Okay.
So
you've kept it pretty tight, pretty lean. Yeah. Given the next steps. But so what were you guys using when I'm talking to providers? I kind of, like to sort of find out, what sort of tech are you guys using? So, from a service point of view, what was your preferred vendor? What storage were you using? Networking, that sort of thing.
It looks a lot different today than it did back then, right? So let me put it that way. But when we started PhoenixNAP Public Cloud, that was our first VMware service offering. And it was a daunting one. Like, if you look back at the history, the PhoenixNAP Public Cloud capability set, and Anthony, we could talk about this for an hour, but literally we were doing way more than what Cloud Director was doing in 2012. You could import OVAs, you could build firewall rules, you could do everything. We were literally working with the Blue Lane guys prior to the vShield creation, orchestrating vShield edges, right, through our own IP and building essentially a public cloud experience where it was like EC2, but it was on vSphere.
Yep.
And this is in 2012, but the whole shtick was enterprise public cloud, Dell, NetApp, Cisco, right? And we thought that people would love that.
Is that the old VC? No, not quite VCE, but almost VCE.
It was a FlexPod, I guess.
Yeah, FlexPod version of the VCE, yeah. No, and look, you made a good point, because obviously you guys have, and this is the thing about what started your company in terms of great innovation, right? Because you guys saw holes in the tooling that you had with vCloud Director and whatnot, even though it was good, but it had holes. And you guys leveraged the technology. You guys wrote your own custom IP. The portal, was it portal driven as well then, or was it
absolutely like full crazy portal driven?
That's awesome, right? Yeah. So that's a great, there wasn't too many at the time that were doing that and doing it well, right? So it's kudos in 2012 that you guys were doing that. So you were like on the first VSPP partners there. You were what was it called back then? The vCloud Director part.
Well, yeah, they had the vCloud Express platform, but that only had like maybe 6 guys in it, right?
Yeah,
Anthony, maybe Colt and Blue Lock and a few guys that aren't even really
Blue Lock,
in the industry anymore. And then I think they added about, I want to say 15 internationally and like 6 or 7 in the US. And we were part of that first 6 or 7 in the US.
Cool. Good stuff. Yeah. So you were part of that crew. And that was great times, right? Because VMware were pushing, it was before the days of VMC and vCloud Air. And they were basically leveraging their own infrastructure as a service through the providers, right? Supporting the providers, which, to be fair, they still do to a certain extent. And, I talk to many people on this show and about, where Cloud Director has got to from those days. And it's certainly a lot more significant than what it was. And the extensibility of it, it's definitely a better piece of software, right? Even though it was pretty cool back then. But you guys took that. And obviously, because you had built now, you're starting this infrastructure, you've got to do backup. Like that's the next step, right? So talk a little bit about, what came through there in 2013 with Veeam, but also just backup in general, because you guys have kind of made a mark in that backup and DRaaS space. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, 2013, we actually went out to a few providers specifically to do what you were talking about. Like, okay, we have this virtualization thing. Why not do some backup stuff, right? It's a very logical step forward for a service provider. And Veeam said, okay, well, we're going to start the service provider business line, right? But we want to start with 5 or 6 guys, and here's the specification you have to meet. And they came back to us. And for us, I mean, I guess it wasn't crazy investment, but for somebody that had no backup business, the demands were pretty large, right? They think that they wanted like 30 terabytes per site for Cloud Connect backup day one, right? So every site that we had, they wanted us to have 30 TB set aside, right?
Yeah.
Very grandiose aspirations at the time.
Okay. So you guys were on that. So, and you're backing up in terms of the infrastructure as a service. So before we get into backup as a service, the infrastructure VMs, because I always find this interesting. So did you offer that as an opt-in or an opt-out service? So how were you backing up customer VMs? Were you backing them up by default, or were customers needing to buy the service off you?
So back then it was completely opt-in. It was an extra thing that if you wanted it, you could get it. And I have very strong opinions about that, right? I don't believe it should be delivered that way. And what we do today is the opposite specifically. But back then it was opt-in.
So you guys opt out today? Is it actually opt out today?
Yeah. So specifically the Data Security Cloud platform, which is our flagship virtualization platform, is well, there's no opt out. You can't be on the platform without a backup.
Right. Okay. And I think we'll get to that a little bit later on, because that kind of comes in. So, and then talk about the challenges of backup as a service, because obviously there was a sweet spot there, obviously in 2014, 2015, where backup as a service took off, because the technology specifically that Veeam provided made it really easy, right? Whereas before there were challenges because networking was hard, and then Veeam made it a little bit easier. I know because I was building similar services at my old place as well, based on Veeam technology with VMware Stack. So talk about some of the challenges though, as it transitioned, because data was still difficult fundamentally to get from on-prem to the data center, right? Now in America, speeds are different and quicker. But regionally speaking, I know that in America, there were still challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so starting backup as a service, what we immediately realized is that the amount of data that existed in other data centers or on-prem, right? Whatever the customer wanted to call on-prem, far exceeded their networking capacity to actually get us data, right? And so especially early on, and I won't say it stopped because data growth is also getting insane.
Proportionate, right?
Early on, we had to have multi-hundred terabyte plus like boxes to ship to people so that they can put their backups, their Veeam backups on it and essentially see it, right? Because there was no way that they were ever going to ship it to us. It's gotten better, but we still have to do really big customers that way.
Yeah, like I was speaking to someone today as an example. They were talking about 2 VMs coming in, both 100 terabytes in size, right? Like it's just insane. Like we wouldn't even think about, like I think when I left Zetagrid, I think the biggest VM that we had in the stack was like maybe 4 or 5 terabytes in size. And even that was a challenge. But, I think you're right though. The proportionate way, yes, comms are better. And I think much like, if I don't know if there's a Moore's curve or Moore's law for communications, but comms have certainly gotten better, not exponentially better, obviously, like CPUs and whatnot, but compared to dial-up, compared to ADSL2 or an ISDN, today most people are going to be on a decent fiber connection at the least, right? Or a VSDL, which is going to, get you some decent speeds up. So it's a lot better, but everything's growing as well.
It's interesting too. I think the funny thing I'll say on that is that the intra data center comms are actually to the point where they've surpassed the needs of most people. Like, 100G to the server, 400G, like these, we see 1% of 1% of customers that actually need that, right? But they're there and they're easy to use.
Yeah. So in terms of the flow, the pipe, the part where it's still congested is really that point at the border outside to you, right? Yeah. Because lots of people are coming through. Now just talk about, before we talk about the security stuff, DR as a service, because that's an interesting one, right? Like, and you guys obviously have run that. Just maybe talk a little bit about the DR as a service, all the vendors that you guys use and within that space.
Yeah. So today we obviously a big Veeam provider, VMware, VCDA, and Zerto still a little bit, mostly on customer demand or what we feel is like there's only one way to accomplish it. And there are some workloads that fit in that area. They're very small. But for us, what we see today is if a customer runs Veeam, it's so easy to just make Veeam Cloud Connect replication work, right? If a customer uses another backup technology, but uses VMware, the VCDA appliance is so easy to just install and like replicate, right? Yeah. And those are kind of our two go-to solutions.
Yeah, and I think it's right. I think it's important for providers to give their customers flexibility of choice, right? And I'm a big proponent of that. I was a big proponent of it. I still am, surprisingly enough. Yeah. Even with my employer, right? Because that the customer should ultimately decide that. But DR as a service, where do you think it's at the moment? Because I still kind of get the feel that it's not quite hit that inflection point where it's become the norm. Because a lot of people go, okay, I've got my stuff in a cloud, that's cool, but they don't understand the realities of that situation. So even from the tier 1 workload on-prem, getting them in, where do you see DR today?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I was telling people 3 or 4 years ago, a DR is finally an everyman thing. When technologies like VCAV and Veeam VCCR became, usable, I felt in my heart of hearts that DR was an accomplishable task for most organizations.
Yeah.
But what we still see is the budget that businesses are allocating to intense data protection is way more limited than I actually think it should be.
Yeah.
So we see customers that are way bigger than you would expect, still relying on either I use the public cloud and then it's taken care of, or offsite backup as a DR strategy. And we try to explain to them, like, look, you have 100 terabytes of data. That's not coming back quickly. Like, is it possible? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it going to be fun? No. Right. And so we continue to have these conversations, like, do some of your data like this, do some of your data with backup, right? DR and backup together.
Yeah, you've hit the spot. Policy. It's a policy-driven approach to that. Tiering, classification of workloads. That's an important start. It surprises me that that's not more popular, and maybe we just haven't had enough people impacted in that way yet. And maybe it's coming, and maybe that'll get there. Interesting. I just thought I might drop it in because I know that you had some interesting things about that. So let's go back in the timeline. Let's go back to 2015, because at the moment you're and you talked about servicing Phoenix, right? But obviously you became bigger than Phoenix and the States. And in 2015, you started out and you launched your first DC or location in the Netherlands. So whereabouts, where did you go to next, and how big are you guys today in terms of locations?
Yeah, so it got interesting, and I like to we call it our pause year, right? So 2015 into early 2016. If you look at our partners, Veeam, VMware, people like that, we had a lot of partners scratching their heads going like, okay, we saw all this growth in 13 and 14. Where's the growth in 15 and 16? And my answer to them was like, we are growing. We're just not growing customers yet. We were building locations and deployments faster than I could. It made my head spin all the time, right? And today we have 18 network deployments across the world, right? We're offering services out of various services out of 12 of those facilities today worldwide.
Okay, cool.
And so it's intense.
Yeah, so 18 points of presence effectively, with 12 of those,
service.
And I'll put the link down to the notes that shows that map location, because I checked it out earlier. So I saw like one in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and a few and through Asia and everywhere. So that's pretty cool. That's a great expansion, and it's a testament to the network and to your team to actually make that work on a global scale, right? So you guys have won some pretty cool. Obviously, a company like you guys gets accolades along the way, and you win awards and Partner of the Year. But I think your Gartner accolades are big. So talk a little bit about what you've been able to achieve with Gartner.
Gartner is important for a lot of our partners and prospects and customers across the globe, right? They rely on them to give them, neutral feedback on everything, concepts and theories and practices to vendors and vendor selection, right? And for us, when we looked at trying to make customers aware of our capabilities, we started with this idea of like, okay, infrastructure as a service, like we have to do that. And unfortunately, Gartner has really kind of probably, I have opinions on it, but they have over-rotated on classification of IaaS. I mean, they really only cover 5 people today, and the world's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
But on the DR side, they continue to kind of explain the pros and cons of about 12 vendors in North America.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, to be named as one of those 12 vendors is important for us, especially the way that they talk about us as a company. And that is being extremely highly technical, as offering a lot of different options, right?
Yeah.
And specifically our ability to bring bare metal into that fold, right? Which is a unique capability.
Yeah, that's a good segue there. Let's talk about, let's spend the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes talking about that. Because in 2019, I guess, like a lot of hosting companies or, infrastructure companies kind of noticed that things were shifting a little bit, that customers were changing. What they demanded from infrastructure was different. Cloud native was coming into play, public cloud acceptance. I mean, even in the lead up to sort of 2017, 18, everyone was still saying, everyone else just give up. It's going to be the public clouds or nothing. And then, containerization took hold. Kubernetes is gaining more and more track. I mean, I've actually had, a few Kubernetes management customers, companies on this show as well. And, backup companies doing Kubernetes and managed Kubernetes. So it's obviously top of mind, right? So in 2019, you guys started an initiative around cloud native. So just talk a little bit about the drivers for that and why, apart from what I've explained, why you guys decided it was time to take a bit of a pivot, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best summary of that is, even though we were growing in 2019 kind of really quickly, we were frustrated by some conversations that we were having with folks, even current customers that have been with us from the beginning, that may really have not kept tabs on who we were as a company. They were leaving to go to the public cloud, especially small data center customers, one rack colo customers, moving to the public cloud. And we would have a conversation with them that sounded like, hey, why, what's your thought process? What's the strategy? How are you doing this? And the guy that we were talking to, the IT director, the CIO, he was like, I don't know. Our VP of engineering, CTO, made the decision on
typical, right? Yeah.
And we're like, okay, well, if we're talking to the wrong person, if the products don't make sense to these people, then we're not going to have success long-term. It wasn't 2019 skies falling, right? It was just, if we want to talk about 2029, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right. So we met as an executive team, and in 2019, I sent out a grandiose email to the whole company that said, look, this is what we're going to dub our cloud native initiative. This is the way that we're going to reimagine all of our products to fit the developer and the IT consumer at the same time.
Okay. So then obviously internal development, but that doesn't mean that you guys have gone and say launched a Kubernetes service or anything like that, right? So your approach to it has been different. So just explain what it is, because this launched in November of 2020 last year. Last year. So, and this was your bare metal cloud, right? So that's what you guys came up with. That was the end of that initiative, right? That was the outcome. So explain that.
That was the first step. And I think that's the logic behind this was, if we can't orchestrate network, servers, and storage in its totality, right? No one touching anything except for putting things in racks, essentially, right?
Yeah.
If we couldn't do that, how could we build any other services that had infinite scale and utility consumption, right? And so that's the methodology that we kind of took. That's why we ended up at bare metal cloud as a starting point. What we've realized over the last basically 2 years since we started this idea was that there's a lot of reasons why bare metal cloud has its own important part in the market of infrastructure as a service that I don't think we realized in 2019. 2019, bare metal cloud was just going to be the platform of all the other things that we would put on top of it.
Yeah. So, okay. So today I'm a customer. I go to your website, go in, swipe a credit card, and I go, I want five servers. And then basically, literally, you guys have got in your data centers, you guys have got the physical servers there ready to go. basically all the software automation, the procurement goes through and allocates it to the servers there. It configures the networking, it basically gets you into it. And then you've got, what's the next step? So once that's all gone, yep, sweet, what do I get?
Yeah, so you have a couple of entry points today. You have an API, RESTful API. You have a infrastructure, a large library of IAC tools, infrastructure as code tools that we support natively. And I think it's a growing list, but I think there's 9 different.
So all the usual ones like Terraform,
Ansible, Pulumi, SaltStack.
Yeah,
you pick it, right? And then the portal, and the portal's always there as an option if you want to go in and do that. But today, if you pick server storage network, right? Instance, network type, network allocation, IP address, things like that, and you get a server. That's the outcome. That is the today outcome. The today outcome is you get a server. And if you're using an IAC tool, there's a lot you can do past that, right? You can make the server into
just so the server is though you choose a Windows server or a Linux server, or so okay. So it's like you go along the way of the procurement, you say what you want, but effectively it's just a Windows server that is bare metal, bam. Or can I order a ESX server?
Coming soon, right?
Okay.
We're committed from a VMware perspective to leveraging our 10 years of experience operating these environments and building what we believe, and I think what VMware will ultimately be willing to stand behind, is the most vSphere VMware native on-demand experience. Yeah. And the thing that's important behind that, is it going to be as big as VMC on AWS? I don't know. But ultimately, our commitment is we're not going to trap VMware products behind a PaaS that is inflexible and proprietary. Yeah. And that's the commitment that we're giving to the VMware community.
Yeah. And what about containers? What about Kubernetes and that sort of thing? So what's the play there? Like what's your answer when a customer comes and say, hey, I want to run some Kubernetes clusters on PhoenixNAP? What's the thing?
So today the container service extension on the VMware side is available, right? This is an answer. It's not the right answer for everybody. Mm-hmm. On the bare metal cloud side, I can't say it unfortunately, Anthony, but I have a very exciting partnership that we're going to announce soon on that side.
That's good.
And the outcome at that point will be a enterprise grade Kubernetes deployment with a management service, right? And a full multi-cloud experience so that customers can deploy on bare metal cloud. They can put their workloads and containers on bare metal cloud. They can put their workloads and containers on AWS or GCP or Microsoft Azure, wherever they feel most comfortable. And that is, again, our goal. How that will work is we will deliver an outcome, which is essentially a blueprint from a procurement request via API, via IAC tool, or via UI. And you'll get Kubernetes management service, cluster, initial cluster, right? And the ability to easily bring nodes into that cluster.
That's exciting. I'm looking. I'll definitely keep up with that. Maybe it's
one other thing I'll say right now is one of our other integrations on the Kubernetes story today, kind of a starter point is today. As of the latest release of Rancher, you can deploy bare metal cloud nodes as nodes in Rancher.
Nice, interesting. No, it's cool. It's obviously the need there, and I think having that as a part service together with the vSphere, the traditional, like the bare metal all in one, it's the hybridity that I think people are going to require in the future, right? So you guys are setting yourself up to be very relevant in that space because that's what they want. And not everyone can go to a hyperscaler and not everyone wants to go to a hyperscaler, right? And that's always the benefit of guys like you guys, which offer that other experience. But you guys are getting, as good in terms of the consumption. The way to consume a cloud has changed. It's not just for the longest time, AWS was like, we're the only way to consume a cloud, right? Well, you can only lead so long, you know what I mean? And yes, they're still behemoth. Yes, they still have lots of good services, but I think customers have understood it's not the only option now. And as devs get smarter, and then the ops guys talk to the devs, still separated in my world. I don't like the dev and the ops being together. I always say that on this show. I prefer separation of dev and ops. But they can then work together to basically get the applications delivered. And if you guys can offer that worldwide as well, you guys are really beautifully placed. And that's awesome.
The last thing, point I'll make on that, Anthony, is, when we're committed to infrastructure. That's the important thing. If anybody can take one thing away from this, is that we are going to build the infrastructure service of the future, not the platform service of the future. So the expectation when you come to us will be, yes, you must use the great open source technology that's been developed to do more yourself, right? But the gains that you're going to get from that are going to be vendor neutrality, no lock-in, cost optimization, performance optimization, and interconnectivity to the hyperscalers in case you want to consume that PaaS service.
Yeah. Look, and usually I ask the guys, how are you being innovative? How are you going to remain innovative moving forward? But you've just basically explained it beautifully, right, in terms of what you guys have done, how you guys disrupted the market initially. And it's funny, it's come full circle in a sense, right? Because you guys started, the idea was to hosting, cool, kind of everyone was doing it, but you did it kind of well. And then you got the data centers. Then you needed a way to sort of create a central connectivity point of presence in PhoenixNAP. That's basically a way of doing what you just explained. But for networking, you guys are just taking it to the next level, but with application hosting, basically, and what runs businesses today. And it's the network has been commoditized, servers, storage have been commoditized to a certain extent. It's all about the consumption, and you guys are doing that pretty well. So I don't even have to ask those questions, because I think we've pretty much covered them. So the one question I will ask at the end is, so what makes a good partner for you? Obviously, through the years, you've partnered with, we've mentioned a few. And I like asking this question of all the providers that come on, but what makes a good partner from your perspective?
I mean, the easy button answers to this are always, positioning and business alignment, right? Making sure that the business is aligned. But we're different in the fact that technology means so much to us. It's about giving us as a service provider the right types of technology to enable and deliver to our customers. And, I look at our partnership with guys like Intel and our ability to be first to market with so many technologies. They didn't have to enable us with that. They didn't have to bring us in and kind of set us up as this essentially incubator for new technologies for customers that are trying to adopt new Intel technologies.
Yep.
But we thrive in that ecosystem. We thrive in vendor partners that will give us great technology so that we can take it to our customers and help us differentiate from the guys we were talking about earlier, public cloud, et cetera.
That's a great answer. I love that. Awesome stuff. All right, mate. Like we could, like you said, we could talk for hours. I usually say that, but you and I could. I think what PhoenixNAP has done is brilliant. I love what you guys have done. I was really keen to get you on the show, obviously. And, you're at a great point. You've had some great announcements recently through the Bare Metal Cloud. It looks like you're going to have a lot more coming. That's cool. Maybe we'll have a follow-up episode in later on. Who knows? But is there anything else that you just wanted to shout out before I wrap it up? Any plugs or anything? Where can people go?
No, I mean, I think ultimately a lot of people look at the three hyperscalers and say, look, this is our options. These are the options that we have. I think it's important that people truly take a look at the market and understand it's not just PNAP, right? There are a solid 10 or 15 very competent, very capable worldwide service providers that can do really cool things for your business. And you're doing your business a disservice if you don't take a look at what they can provide.
Brilliant. All right, no worries. So with that, we'll wrap it up. I'll put the show notes down, put the links to the Bare Metal Cloud and other PNAP resources. You can find me at Anthony Spiteri on Twitter, at GTWGT Podcast, and at gtwgt.com. LinkedIn. We were talking about links before. I got that in my mind. If you aren't subscribed, again, please subscribe to the show. If you like what you hear, please go to the website and gauge your interest to be on the show. And with that, Thank you, William. Thank you, PhoenixNAP, and we will catch you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.